Have you ever caught yourself wondering what knife you'd be carrying in the zombie apocalypse? How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And if you answered that question with a yes, I want you to go ahead and smash that like button because you, my friend, are in good company. It's the Halloween season. It's October. We're halfway to Halloween. We're breaking out the candy for the kids. And it's also the time of year where we're going to watch some zombie movies. And so I thought, what better time to go ahead and release a scenario video of what knife out of my collection would I pick if the world were to end tomorrow? Would it be this knife? Stick with me. Let's find out which knife would be best to take with you into a zombie apocalypse. Let's go. All right, everybody, so it's time to entertain the zombie apocalypse theory. The world has ended, and maybe you have a firearm, but there's no reason why you can't also have a knife, because guess what? Knives don't run out of bullets. So let's go ahead and see which out of this small part of my collection would I choose if I have the option of taking just one with me into a zombie apocalypse. But first, I still have stickers to give away. That's right. Holographic, sharp and shiny channel stickers. I've already sent a few of these out to some viewers, and I'm going to tell you how you can get some more. So every Wednesday from here on out, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, I will be doing a live stream where we can talk about knives, we can talk about knife stories, we can talk about whatever. But I'll be doing a live stream. So if you're interested in interacting with me in live format, feel free to hop on by the channel 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time every Wednesday. I will be using that time to give out some of my remaining channel stickers, and I do have some left. And if you like the sharp and shiny like I do, I'd be happy to send some of these your way. This is not my entire collection. This is just what I can fit in the frame. And I've picked some that I thought would be top runners for this scenario. In this scenario, I want you to imagine that you have to travel light. Light meaning that at the end of the day, you can't just take your whole knife collection with you. It's a zombie apocalypse. The world has ended. Maybe you need to travel cross country to get to a safe zone. And in that time, you can pick one knife to take with you. I don't want you to feel like this is your only weapon. It's a zombie apocalypse. You're probably going to use up most of your carry space by, carrying AR-15s, pistols, what have you. But you need a knife. So, if this was your collection, which one would you pick? First and foremost, guys, I'm going to start off by eliminating some knives that are just too damn small. If you have to fight off zombies, you pretty much want to get as big of a blade length as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of these more EDC friendly knives. Like, for example, this Bestech Nixie. Love this knife. Super cool design, very fun and fidgety, good materials. But if this is standing between me and a zombie, no. So bear with me while I eliminate some of these extras. All right, so we went ahead and we eliminated about 4 or 5 knives that weren't bad knives. I mean, hell, I eliminated this, which is possibly one of my most favorite, most cherished knives in my collection, the Spyderco Para 3. I love this knife, but for example, it's just too damn small. This is definitely not enough blade length between me and a zombie. So yeah, this is what we're left with. So let's kind of go over and see what we got here. First and foremost, we have the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, which is a recent addition to my collection. Absolutely love it. I went ahead and put on the Wiseman Company Fang to make it easy to get it in and out of the pocket. It's a deep carry clip that I added on there as well. Otherwise, it's fully stock. And this has crew wear, CPM crew wear, which is a great, tough powder metallurgy tool steel that is heat treated very, very well by Spyderco. Spyderco's fit and finish and their factory production is just top notch. So this is one that has to be in the discussion because it's a Spyderco. If it's the end of the world, Spydercos will probably be the only knives that are left at some point. Next up, we've got the Spyderco Smock, which is another great example of good production from Spyderco. It is a button style lock, but it's a compression lock, so it's not spring based. It has carbon fiber layered over G10, so that's some good sturdy material right there. Steel liner, titanium pocket clip that will not rust, and of course S30V steel, which is great edge retention. This one has a hollow grind, and ultimately it's just another Spyderco that I have to include. While we're on that Spyderco kick, I have two more Spydercos, one of them being the Manix 2. The Manix 2 is a great one because it's got that super sturdy ball bearing lock that is a very good load bearing lock. It can withstand a hell of a beating. It's got G10 handle scales, S30V steel, and overall it's got maybe not the most comfortable ergonomics, but maybe one of the most easy to hang on to. This one still has my least favorite pocket clip in the history of mankind with the stock Spyderco pocket clip. Would it make it to the zombie apocalypse with me? Maybe, because there's simply no way that I will ever be able to truly rid myself of Spyderco's pocket clips. What else we got? Next, we have the Bestech Exploit, which is basically Bestech's version of a Manix 2 minus the ball bearing lock. And I'll talk more about that in a future video that will be coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. But this one has a very similar blade shape, flat grind, carbon fiber and titanium handle scales, full titanium. And it's just one of those knives that it's got great ergonomics and you just feel like a beast with it. It's a front flipper. This will keep you entertained during your long journey across the country trying to get to that safe zone. It's not the longest blade, but it is longer than the Manix 2, and it's going to offer quite a decent amount of heft. So for that reason, I felt like I had to include this in here. We'll see how far it makes it while we go through and eliminate some of these knives. And then finally, we have the Spyderco Yojimbo 2, because if you were to survive the zombie apocalypse, chances are Michael Janich would as well, because he is just straight and plain a badass. And he created one of the best self-defense knives in the knife market, depending upon who you ask. This one is meant to do some damage. It's got a nice Wharncliffe blade, and on this one I did have the 5x5 Combat Solutions pickpocket, and it's just a knife that I would definitely at least consider while taking my trek across the country to get to that safe zone. All right, so that's the top row. Guys, next we have up the Cold Steel AD15 with the Scorpion lock. Now, I absolutely love this knife because it's basically a folding fixed blade. It's nice and long. It's got it's pretty much a 4-inch blade, nice beefy grind, drop point, very tried and proven. So it's going to be good for more than just fending off zombies. But if you wanted to, you could attach this to a long stick and use it as a spear. Don't throw away your knives, but you could if you wanted to, and that's my point. It does have the Spyderco clone clip. Like I said, I don't think I'll ever truly be able to escape that. Thanks, Spyderco. Out of all the great things you gave us, I wish that pocket clip would go away. Aside from that, it does have this, I'm going to call it dinosaur grip texture G10. Because it's going to take a bite out of your hand every time. But you know, if you're geared to the nines, chances are you might be wearing gloves, and this would be a good one for wearing gloves. So this one definitely had to make it. If it's a zombie apocalypse, I know 9 out of 10 of you would probably pick a Cold Steel anyways, and this one just happens to be the Cold Steel that I have in my collection. So that is why this one is there. Next up, we have the Grant Gripper. This is also a larger knife, Wharncliffe style, frag pattern titanium with titanium hardware. This one is going to be hard to drop, and because it's the only grail that I've ranked and reviewed on my channel so far, there's no way I couldn't also include this in this video. Love the Warncliffe style blade, large handles, it's plenty of reach, and the blade itself is M390, so it's going to have great edge retention all throughout. It's a frame lock, so the lock's not going to be something that you need to worry about, and it's very fidgety as well, which means that, of course, just like with the Exploit, you're going to have plenty of opportunity to let it keep you company and entertain you on that long trek across the country, getting to that safe zone. Let's take another look at that. Oh yeah. God, I love this knife. And then next up, purely because of its size, we've got the BRS Kopesh with the liner lock, this crazy thumb stud, titanium pocket clip, M390 blade, and shredded carbon fiber with the gold titanium barrel spacers for an accent. This one is a large knife, just like with the Cold Steel 8015, as well as the Grant Gripper. This is a large knife, so it's something that you definitely have to consider when you are considering what knife you're going to bring across the country with you. And then something also that's worth considering is this QSP Pangolin. Now the Pangolin is a weird looking knife, but if you always wanted a Hinder XM18 and you could just never afford one or find one available, this is going to be a great bet because it's a very similar shape. It's got a nice long blade that's close to 4 inches, a stamp pocket clip, and here's the thing, it's cheap. It's cheap. So you know what, if you have to hide your whole collection and then trek across the country, it's definitely one that you have to consider, because if you lose it, you're not going to cry about it because it's a QSP Pangolin and you've spent 50 bucks on it. So this one definitely has to be considered, and yeah, definitely has to be considered. D2 blade steel, G10 handle scales, steel liner, stamped pocket clip. Let's go. And then, of course, we've got this guy. Now, I did a video on this when I first built the channel, and I need to do another one because this is honestly one of my favorite knives in the collection. It's not a super expensive one. This is the Boker Pocket Smash It, which is a single-edged dagger blade, although you could, and I don't suggest this, but you could sharpen this faux edge into a real edge, and I just wouldn't suggest it. But it's got VG10 steel, which is not terribly hard to sharpen, rosewood handle scales, and it's a steel liner with this 70s diner style pocket clip. Take a look at that. I love that pocket clip. I'm not sure if it really fits on this knife, but I like it. And this is one that deploys with some authority. 4-inch blade, nice wide blade profile. This is definitely super stabby, so you know what, Zombie Apocalypse might definitely be one that you want to consider, and it's definitely one that I had to consider when I was coming up with this lineup. And then finally, we've got this guy. This is my Microtech Cypher, because you know what, if it's good enough for John Wick, it's good enough for me. And before you lambaste me in the comments section saying,
oh, John Wick had a dagger style blade,
well, he also had a Cypher, and just because he didn't have the Cypher that had the Warncliffe doesn't mean that I don't. Same knife, different blade shape. Don't at me. So yeah, guys, this is the knife selection that made it to the first round. Now you might be wondering, how do you make it past the first round? Well, it's going to come down to blade size. So essentially, to make it past the first round, it cannot be a smaller blade. When I'm thinking about putting distance between me and a potential zombie, I got to go ahead and move forward with something that is as long as possible. So unfortunately, we're going to have to say goodbye to this top row because they are all under 4 inches. So, and then there were 6. So we went ahead and eliminated all of the knives that are below 4-inch blade length because, let's be honest, you're going to want a knife as big as possible. And before you say,
oh, I would have a fixed blade because, you know, like I have fixed blade. I'd be smart about it.
Well, you know what? If you don't have fixed blades in your collection, chances are you wouldn't be able to take one with you. These are the knives that made it to the second round. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the weak points. The weak point with this Microtech Cypher is, even though it's good enough for John Wick lives in a world where he can go out and buy a lubrication if he needs to. Do you really want to be fending off a zombie? You go to deploy your knife and then this doesn't fully deploy, and then you're, you know, struggling at the last minute trying to get that spring to work, so on and so forth. No. So that's definitely a big weak point for the Cypher. weak point for the Boker Pocket Smash it is, even though this looks ideal because it's a nice dagger style with this hardwood handle, it is a liner lock. Now the liner lock is not necessarily a big deal, except it is traditionally the weakest of these lock types that are available right here, and it's one of those things that you just have to think about because you don't want that knife lock to fail in a tense situation. Furthermore, same issue with the Pangolin as well as with the BRS Khopesh. They are both liner locks as well. So that's kind of the weak point. On the Pangolin, I'm going to say the pocket clip is a weak point because I don't necessarily trust that pocket clip to really withstand a whole lot of abuse. And furthermore, on the Khopesh, while this handle scale looks gorgeous, and that is a good looking handle scale, let's go ahead and get in nice in there. Yeah, look at that, nice and shiny. And we like the sharp and shiny here. My problem is that this handle scale is slick as, yeah. So despite the fact that it's a good looking knife, the issue that I would have would be the liner lock and the handle scale being super, super smooth. Downside on the Grant Gripper, it's got great handle scales, good grip, good ergonomics, fidget factor, good blade steel, good materials. It does get kind of thin down here at the tip. Yeah. So it does get kind of thick down here at the tip. So you stab on this a couple times and you might just go ahead and snap it. And if you can't, if this tip gets snapped off, it's going to be hard to stab again. It'll be nice for cutting, but not for stabbing. And yeah, so that's going to be the weak point, is the actual blade geometry itself. It does get nice and thin down there at the tip. Good for slicing, will be good for initial stabs, but it's one of those things that could fail you. And then we've got the Demko the Cold Steel AD15. Now on this one, the blade's not an issue. We're talking about S35 VN steel. The handle scales aren't an issue. These aren't the most comfortable handle scales without gloves, but you might be wearing gloves. It's nice and textured. It's very weighty. It's a longer blade. You feel like you could chop down a tree with this knife because the lock is solid. However, the lock is also the weak point on this knife because there's a spring back here. That's right, there is a spring, and so when you go to lift that yoke, that's right, this lock is called a yoke. It is based off of tension in a spring. It's a very heavy duty spring, but it's a spring no less, and it's one of those things that you just have to consider. Do you want to trust your life to a spring in a situation where you just can't go ahead and send this back to the manufacturer and tell them that you broke the knife lock? Something to consider. So we have to eliminate a few more knives because these are all decent choices. I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the knife locks that I don't necessarily believe in. So that means that I have to eliminate the liner locks. Love this knife. Boker Pockets match it. This is one that I thought would actually make it a bit farther, but it didn't. So we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to the Boker Pockets match it. Another liner lock is the QSP Pangolin. While you're not going to necessarily worry about losing or damaging this one on your trek across the country trying to get to that safe zone, I do not trust myself with a liner lock. If it meant my life, I definitely wouldn't, and I'm also not a huge fan of D2 in that situation because if I ended up using this knife and it got dull and I had to sharpen it, sharpening D2 would be a no. Then, of course, this guy is also a liner lock. This is the BRS Khopesh. It's a terrible liner lock. The access to that lock bar is not the greatest, and it's also not the most comfortable. And while the handle scales themselves are pretty and definitely, beautiful to look at, they're also slick as shit, and I would not want to have to worry about holding on to this thing in a life or death situation with a zombie. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to that one. All right. So here we are, down to the last three, and I'm going to eliminate another one real quick. I've got to eliminate this Microtech Cypher, and the reason is that even though I know Microtech builds a knife that can withstand a beating, I've seen a lot of videos where these are just punished, man. They're punished. I don't necessarily trust being able to maintain a out the front OTF knife in a zombie apocalypse because, number one, even if I had extra oil, extra rem oil, if I needed to take it apart, I wouldn't know how to put it back together. And even if I did, I don't have the ability to get those tri-wing screws off. Thanks, Microtech. Good enough for John Wick in every day-to-day life, but in this situation, not good enough for our zombie apocalypse survival situation. Last two, we've got the Grant Gripper and the Cold Steel AD-15. Give me a thumbs up if you thought at the beginning of the video that a Cold Steel would be making it to the top 2 knives to bring in a zombie apocalypse. You know, I'm just going to throw this out there, but these knives would be probably my biggest 2 options given the scenario. I like the blade length on both. I absolutely love the aesthetic on this Grant Gripper. I love the titanium. The titanium is going to be rust resistant. It's going to be durable. This one's a heavy boy, but then again, this one is too. They're actually very similar in weight. This one edges it a little bit because it's got that custom brass backspacer. But yeah, while this Grant Gripper, again, the issue that I have with it is this blade geometry. The blade geometry for everyday use is absolutely perfectly great. Like, this will kick the crap out of any Amazon boxes or letters that you come into contact with. And if you have a boring day, you can sit here and fidget with this thing to high heavens because it's just a fun knife. I don't have any issue with the lockup. I don't have any issue with the D10 or the carry. The fact that it's heavy is really, really good for this scenario because if you need to brain something, you know what? You want it to be a heavy knife. And on this one might not have the most crazy premium materials, but it's built for work. This was built for, you know, batoning and, you know, camping, and Cold Steel just makes these beefy knives. Like, this AD-15 is actually considered small in Cold Steel's lineup because if you've ever seen some of their knives, they just come out with these ridiculously large knives. So this is actually quite small, even though it's a bigger knife for my collection. At the end of the day, S35VN is a perfectly serviceable steel. This one has a thick spine from tang to tip, and it's not going to leave you hanging there. But again, the concern that I have is the spring that's connected to this yoke, because at the end, I just want to make sure that the knife's going to stay usable and working during the time that I have it. And if I can't maintain it, I don't want it to be a death sentence. So here's what it comes down to on this one. If you got to trek across country and defend your life against zombies, you're going to be using this knife. You're going to be stabbing it into things. Maybe you're going to fix it to something like a bayonet. And if you do that with this Grant Gripper, as beautiful of a knife as this is, that tip is going to cause an issue because it is thinner down here at the tip, and it's great for stabbing, but the moment it hits something that's hard, you know, you could have a problem. And so for that reason, while it makes an excellent runner-up, the Grant Gripper is not the ideal pocket knife to bring with you in a zombie apocalypse. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner. Now, I'm curious, did you think that this was going to make it all the way? Did you think that Cold Steel, would this make Lynn Thompson proud? Is this the right knife? Did I pick correctly? Or did I pick a knife that was just asinine? I want to know your comments and your opinions down below, so make sure you do that. If you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't like it, boo-hoo, there's a button for you too. And if you want to see more just like it, make sure you hit subscribe. Other than that, I'll catch you on the flip side.